When the homeless kid shouted, "Don't eat that!" no one expected what would happen next. The Land Cafe was a magnet for the city's elite, tucked between rows of manicured trees and the soft hum of a nearby fountain. It was midday, and the cafe buzzed with life. Waiters in crisp uniforms wove gracefully between tables, balancing trays of artisan dishes and freshly brewed coffee. The air smelled of warm bread and the faint sweetness of blooming flowers. But for one man, none of this seemed remarkable. At a prime table in the center sat Lucas Reed, a name synonymous with power and wealth. He had built his empire from scratch, starting with real estate in his 20s and expanding into ventures that few could dream of. At 65, he carried himself with the confidence of someone who owned not just his world, but perhaps the worlds of everyone around him. His sharp suit and gold-rimmed glasses reflected a life of opulence. Yet, as he glanced at the menu, his movements were slow, almost hesitant. Opposite him sat Chloe, his much younger wife, a woman who looked as though she had been plucked straight from a magazine cover. Her jet-black hair framed a face that was impossibly polished. Bright red lipstick was carefully applied, every inch of her screaming elegance. But her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Absent-mindedly, she twirled a diamond bracelet on her wrist, her attention fixed not on her husband, but on the glowing screen of her phone. Nearby, just beyond the patio fence, a boy lingered. He was small for his age, his oversized hoodie hanging loosely on his thin frame. His dark eyes darted from table to table, scanning plates and pockets, searching for an opportunity. His name was Jack, though no one in the cafe knew him. His face was familiar on this street, a kid with nowhere to go, always on the outskirts of conversations and the edges of concern. Lucas glanced at his watch. "You're distracted again," he said, his voice calm but pointed. Chloe looked up and smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "I'm right here," she replied sweetly, reaching across the table to place her hand on his. "You know how much I enjoy these lunches." Jack's stomach growled. He moved closer, his footsteps nearly silent as he leaned against the patio railing. His eyes landed on Bernard's table. The meal was the kind he hadn't seen up close in months, a pristine white bowl of soup, flanked by fresh bread and a glass of sparkling water. But then, something unusual happened. As Lucas adjusted his glasses and picked up his phone, Jack's gaze flicked to Chloe. Her hand slipped into her designer handbag. Slowly, her fingers closed around a small vial. She twisted it open with a casual flick, tilting her hand ever so slightly over the steaming bowl. A clear liquid dripped down, vanishing into the soup as if it had never been there. Jack's breath caught. He froze. Chloe stirred the soup with a spoon, her expression unchanged. Then, she leaned closer to Lucas, her voice low but just audible enough. "After all the trouble I've gone through, you won't ruin this now." Jack blinked, his mind racing. Had he really just seen that? Could a woman who looked so perfect, sitting in a place so polished, really be doing what he thought? His heart pounded. He crouched lower behind the railing, his fists clenching, nails digging into his palms. No one else had noticed. No one else had been paying attention. It was just him. The faint growl in Jack's stomach pulled him back to reality, but his eyes remained fixed on the couple. Lucas looked tired, distracted, his spoon hovering over the bowl as he checked his phone. Chloe was all charm and poise again, her smile bright, her hand resting on her chin, as if she hadn't just whispered something chilling moments ago. Jack could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him. His instincts screamed at him to walk away. Why get involved? Who would believe a kid like him? A boy in a threadbare hoodie, standing at the edges of a world he wasn't welcome in. He swallowed hard, glancing around at the other patrons. Laughter. Chatter. The clinking of glasses. No one cared. No one even noticed him. But then his gaze returned to Lucas's spoon, now dipping into the soup. Jack felt his chest tighten. It wasn't just his imagination. He had seen her pour something into it. He knew what would happen if the old man took a bite. His thoughts raced. He didn't know this man, but that didn't matter. Wrong was wrong. The moment stretched endlessly. And then, without thinking, Jack pushed himself off the railing and marched straight to the table. His legs felt like lead, but his feet didn't stop. His voice cracked as he shouted, "Don't eat that." Heads turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. The clatter of a dropped fork echoed across the cafe. Lucas froze, his spoon inches from his lips, his wide eyes locking onto the boy. Chloe whipped her head around, her expression hardening. "What did you just say?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut through glass. Jack didn't falter. His voice was shaky, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "She put something in your food. I saw her. Don't eat it." Gasps rippled through the café. Every patron turned toward the scene. The silence that followed was suffocating. Jack stood his ground, his chest heaving as adrenaline surged through him. Lucas blinked, glancing between the boy and his wife. "Chloe." His tone was calm, but his hand trembled as he set the spoon down on the table. Chloe's composure snapped like a rubber band stretched too thin. She shot to her feet, her chair scraping loudly against the stone floor. "You little liar," she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "Who dare you accuse me of so meeting so vile? Who even let you in here?" The words stung, but Jack didn't back down. His eyes remained locked on Lucas, desperate to make him see the truth. "Ihr savez here." Jack insisted. "She poured something into your soup when you weren't looking. You can smell it if you don't believe me." Lucas' face paled. Slowly, he turned toward his wife, his eyes narrowing. "Chloe, what's going on?" His voice was quiet but firm. She scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "He's just trying to cause trouble. Look at him, he probably just wants money or food," she spat, her words laced with disdain. Her gaze flicked to Jack, cold and sharp. But Jack didn't waver. He stepped closer to the table, his fists clenched. "I'm not lying," he said firmly, his voice rising. "She doesn't want you to know, but I saw everything." Lucas's hand lingered over the bowl, torn between disbelief and the gnawing doubt creeping into his mind. The air around the table thickened. The once lively cafe was now eerily silent. All eyes were locked on the unfolding drama, their meals forgotten. Lucas leaned back slightly in his chair, studying the boy with a scrutinizing gaze. His face bore the marks of a man used to people playing games with him, trying to take advantage of his wealth. But this was different. The boy didn't flinch. Didn't look away. "Jack, is it?" Lucas asked, his voice steady, though a trace of suspicion lingered. The boy nodded. "Yes. I'm telling the truth. Please, don't eat it." His voice was soft but insistent. Chloe let out a harsh laugh, crossing her arms as she stared Jack down. "This is absurd," she snapped, her tone icy. "He's just some street kid looking for attention. Are you really going to entertain this nonsense, Lucas?" But Lucas didn't answer her. Instead, he picked up the spoon again, this time holding it closer to his face. His hand trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from the quiet storm brewing within him. "Chloe," he said slowly, his eyes meeting hers. "You heard him. What exactly is going on here?" Chloe's mask of poise cracked further, her lips pressing into a thin line. "I can't believe you're even asking me that. It's insulting." She turned to the growing crowd, her voice rising. "He's lying. Look at him. He probably doesn't even know who you are. Why would you trust him over me?" The weight of her words hung in the air, but they didn't have the effect she had hoped for. The crowd murmured now, their eyes darting between the three of them. Whispers floated through the air. Did she really do it? Look at her, she seems nervous. That boy doesn't look like he's making this up. The murmurs only fueled Chloe's fury. She slammed her hands on the table, her polished demeanor gone. Enough of this. Lucas, eat your damn soup and let's go, she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. But Jack wasn't backing down. He took another step forward, his fists clenched tightly. If you won't believe me, then call someone to test it, he said, his voice rising with urgency. You're rich. You've got lawyers, doctors, people who can figure it out. But don't eat it. If you do, you'll regret it. Lucas's jaw tightened as he turned back to the bowl. The spoon was still in his hand, but he didn't lift it to his lips. His eyes, tired and calculating, shifted to his wife. Chloe, he said, his voice low. You've been acting strange for weeks now. This. Her face flushed, and she stumbled over her words. I don't know what you're talking about. You can't seriously think I'd poison me. Lucas finished for her, his tone razor-sharp. The crowd gasped audibly, their whispers growing louder. Jack stood firm, his gaze unwavering. He could feel his heart pounding, but he wouldn't let it show. He'd done what he could. Now, it was up to Lucas to make the next move. Chloe straightened up, her expression hardening into something cold and unfamiliar. This is ridiculous. I don't have to sit here and listen to this nonsense, she said, grabbing her handbag. But before she could leave, Lucas's hand shot out, gripping her wrist with surprising strength for a man his age. You're not going anywhere, he said firmly. Not until we get to the bottom of this. The waiter, who had been frozen in place, finally found his voice. Sir, should I call the police? The question sent a ripple through the cafe. For the first time, Chloe looked genuinely panicked. She shook her head violently. Don't you dare. This is just a misunderstanding. Lucas, you can't seriously. But Lucas raised his hand, silencing her. Yes, he said, addressing the waiter without looking away from Chloe. Call them. Jack felt a surge of relief, but it was fleeting. The truth wasn't out yet, and the tension was far from over. The cafe held its collective breath as the waiter hurried inside to make the call. Lucas let go of Chloe's wrist, his eyes never leaving hers. The once polished charm she wore so effortlessly was now unraveling, replaced by a growing sense of desperation. Her lips moved, but no sound came out, as though she were searching for an escape. Meanwhile, Jack stood a few steps back, his hands shaking slightly. He had done all he could, but now he felt the weight of doubt creeping in. What if the man didn't believe him after all? What if she managed to talk her way out of this? He clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay rooted in place. Jack, Lucas said suddenly, his voice cutting through the tension. You said you saw her put something in the soup. Can you describe it? The boy nodded quickly, stepping forward. It was a small bottle, like one you'd use for medicine. Clear liquid. She poured it in when you were looking at your phone, then stirred it. I swear, I saw it. Lucas's face tightened. He turned to Chloe, who was already shaking her head. This is absurd. He's lying. Why would I? But Lucas cut her off. Why would he lie? What could he possibly gain from this? The crowd murmured again, and the sound of sirens in the distance only added to the charged atmosphere. Chloe's eyes darted toward the soup. For a split second, her carefully crafted facade slipped completely. She looked cornered. Then, as if grasping at straws, she rounded on Jack. You've been spying on us, haven't you? She snarled. Trying to cause trouble because you're jealous of people who actually have something. The words hit Jack like a slap, but he stood his ground. I'm not jealous, he said firmly. I saw what I saw, and I couldn't just stand there and let you hurt him. The sirens grew louder. Moments later, 2 police officers entered the cafe. The room seemed to shrink as they approached the table, their hands resting on their belts. What's going on here? One of the officers asked, his tone neutral but authoritative. Lucas stood, his towering frame still commanding respect despite his age. "Officers, I need you to take a look at this," he said, gesturing toward the bowl of soup. "This boy claims my wife poisoned it." The officers exchanged glances, their expressions carefully blank. One of them leaned down, sniffing the bowl cautiously, then turned to Chloe. "Ma'am, do you have anything to say about this?" Her face turned crimson. "This is ridiculous. He's just a street kid trying to make trouble. Lucas, you're really going to let this nonsense go this far?" But the officer wasn't buying her deflection. "We need to test the contents," he said, reaching for the bowl. "No." Chloe snapped, her voice rising. The outburst drew even more attention. Her sudden panic only made her look guiltier. The officer paused, narrowing his eyes. "Ma'am, is there something you'd like to tell us before we proceed?" Chloe hesitated, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She looked at Lucas, then at the officers, her hands trembling as she clutched her handbag. Finally, her resolve crumbled. "Fine," she spat, her voice low but dripping with venom. "You want the truth? I'm tired of living in his shadow. Tired of his control over everything. He was never supposed to make it past this year, and I—" She stopped abruptly, realizing too late that she'd said too much. The cafe erupted in gasps, some patrons pulling out their phones to record the scene. Lucas's face went pale as the weight of her confession hit him like a truck. The officer stepped forward, his expression grim. "Ma'am, I'm placing you under arrest for attempted murder. Please put your hands where I can see them." Chloe's composure shattered completely. She screamed, trying to wriggle free as they secured her hands behind her back. "You don't understand. I deserved everything he had. Everything," she shouted as they led her away, her voice echoing through the stunned cafe. Lucas sank back into his chair, his hand trembling as he pushed the soup away. For a moment, he said nothing, his face a mask of disbelief and betrayal. Then his eyes found Jack, who stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. But as Lucas's gaze softened, a flicker of gratitude replaced the anger in his expression. Jack hadn't just saved his life. He'd revealed a truth Lucas would have never seen coming. The cafe slowly returned to a low hum of whispers and murmurs as the officers escorted Chloe out, her protests fading into the distance. Patrons exchanged wide-eyed glances, still reeling from what they had just witnessed. Some looked at Lucas with pity, others with curiosity. But Jack didn't move. He stood rooted to the spot, unsure if he was supposed to stay or slip away quietly. Lucas turned to the boy, his face still pale but his eyes now steady. "Jack," he said softly, gesturing to the seat across from him. "Seat." Jack hesitated, glancing around at the onlookers. But Lucas's voice carried a weight that made him obey. Slowly, he sank into the chair, his shoulders tense. "You saved my life," Lucas said, his voice low but firm. "I don't know how I can ever repay you." Jack fidgeted, his hands gripping the edge of the table. I couldn't let it happen," he said quietly. "I couldn't just watch and say nothing." Lucas nodded, his gaze distant for a moment, as if replaying the entire ordeal in his mind. "Most people would have," he said after a pause. "They would have turned the other way, pretended they didn't see. But you didn't. That took courage, boy." Jack shrugged, his voice barely above a whisper. Just. I don't like seeing people get hurt, that's all." Lucas leaned back, studying the boy. For the first time, he seemed to really see him, not just as a scrappy kid on the streets, but as someone with a story. A soul. "How long have you been out here?" The question caught Jack off guard. He looked away, his voice tinged with embarrassment. "A while." Lucas frowned but didn't press. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek black phone. "Wait here," he said, standing and stepping aside to make a call. Jack watched him, unsure of what to do. His heart pounded with anxiety. Was he in trouble now? Was Lucas going to call someone to have him removed? But when Lucas returned, his expression was calm, almost kind. "Help is on the way," he said simply. "Help?" Jack asked, his brow furrowing. Lucas nodded. "I called someone I trust. They'll make sure you have a place to sleep tonight. Somewhere safe. And if you'll let me, I'd like to do more than that." Jack's eyes widened. "You don't have to do that," he said quickly, his voice defensive. "I didn't do this for money or anything." Lucas smiled faintly. "I know. That's why I want to help you. You did something most people wouldn't have. And trust me, Jack, if the world had more people like you, it would be a much better place." For the first time in a long while, Jack felt a warmth he couldn't quite describe. He looked down, unsure of what to say. The cafe patrons began to disperse, but the weight of what had happened lingered in the air. Lucas picked up his glass of water, taking a long sip before speaking again. "Sometimes, life gives us the chance to change someone else's story," he said, his voice thoughtful. "You changed mine today, Jack. And maybe, just maybe, I can help change yours." Jack glanced up at him, his dark eyes glistening with something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Hope. As the two sat in silence, the sun continued its arc across the sky, casting long shadows across the cafe. The lesson wasn't lost on anyone who had witnessed the event. Courage doesn't always wear a suit, and kindness doesn't always come from the wealthy. Sometimes, the people we overlook have the greatest strength of all. In the end, Jack's bravery didn't just save a life. It reminded everyone in that cafe of the power of standing up for what's right, no matter the odds. If this story moved you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join us for more tales of courage, truth, and redemption. Share this video with someone who might need a reminder that even small actions can create life-changing impacts.